Good afternoon. This is Carol Riley, and I will be facilitating today's webinar, Cultivating Leadership in Others. Our webinar is sponsored by the Wallace Foundation, which does research for school leadership. Their publication, The School Principal as Leader, Guiding Schools to Better Teaching and Learning, was published and updated in 2013. This document draws on both case studies and large quantitative analysis done by the Wallace Foundation and established 5 key practices of effective school leadership. Our webinars focus on each of these key practices. The first key practice is shaping a vision, creating a climate. This webinar, the third in our series, is Cultivating Leadership. Our next webinar next Tuesday will be on improving instruction, and our final webinar in February is managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement. This third in a series and Cultivating Leadership is a result of a long, broad, and long-standing consensus in leadership theory that holds that all leaders in all walks of life and all kinds of organizations, public and private, need to depend on others to accomplish the group's purpose and need to encourage the development of leadership across the organization. Schools are no different than businesses in cultivating leadership. And teachers rate principals high on climate surveys when they identify strengths and support leadership in faculty. This particular research is founded on studies from the universities of Minnesota and Toronto, Canada. Other great resources are listed on this page. The Kouzes and Posner, The Leadership Challenge, How to Keep Getting Extraordinary Things Done in Organizations, really gives a lot of insight into how to develop leadership and would be an incredibly important document for people who are deep into the study of leadership and shared leadership. They say in this document to generate power all around and create confidence and competence. As we explore the experiences and learning of 3 successful principles during this webinar today and how they cultivate leadership, think about how a culture is developed through leadership actions that you use for that common vision that is more than a statement on the wall or on a school's website. We will also look at one principle's exploration to understand if this culture of shared leadership in his school is working effectively.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Honor Feedy. I'm with NAESP, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar on the school principal. I would like to introduce Carol Riley with us. She will be introducing our speakers.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. This particular webinar is Cultivating Leadership in Others, and it comes from a publication by the Wallace Foundation, which has published many reports, more than 70 since the year 2000, on leadership and leadership development in our schools. The Wallace Foundation draws on many, many case studies and large quantities of analysis which they've done, and through all of their development of leadership studies, it resulted in 5 important key practices of effective school leadership. The first key practice is shaping a vision. The second key practice is creating a climate. And the third key practice, which is the practice that we will be discussing today, is cultivating leadership in others. The fourth key practice is improving instruction, and a webinar will be held next Tuesday on this topic. The final key practice is managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement. This third webinar that we are working with today on cultivating leadership in others focuses on a key practice which has long, broad, and long-standing consensus in leadership theory. It holds that leaders in all walks of life and all kinds of organizations, public and private, depend on others to accomplish the group's purposes and the need to encourage the development of leadership across the organizations. This is not new information for school principals. We certainly know that developing leadership in our staff, both certified and non-certified, is an important element in having effective schools. So schools are no different. Teachers rate principals high on climate surveys when the teachers identify their strengths through the leadership of their principals, and when principals support leadership in all faculty. The research that is based from the Wallace Foundation mainly comes from the universities of Minnesota and Toronto, which both institutions have done a tremendous amount of research around leadership and developing leadership in others. When you enlist others in a common vision and develop a shared sense of destiny, there are some really important resources listed on this page. The books by Kouzes and Posner, Leadership Challenge, J.W. Gardner on Leadership, and Leadership in Organizations by Uckel are important resources for any school leader. I will be facilitating this work today, and the three principals, the three expert principals who will be presenting their leadership processes for developing others on their staffs are, first of all, Adam Drummond. And Adam is the principal of Lincoln Elementary School in Huntington, Indiana. In Huntington County Community School Corporation since 2002, he has served as a classroom teacher, technology specialist, teacher trainer, assistant principal, and currently as principal. He is a doctoral student at Ball State University, earning his degree in educational administration. He's on the board of the Indiana Association of School Principals, and he is a nationally certified NAESP principal mentor and serves as an adjunct instructor at Huntington University. Our next presenter will be Beverly Lund, who graduated from the University of Washington and received a master's from Western Washington University in school administration. This is her 25th year as a principal and her 18th year as the principal of Whitman Elementary School in Spokane City Schools, Washington. In 2012, Beverly was named National School Principal representing Washington State and was recognized by NAESP as a National Distinguished Principal in October of 2013. Chris Young began his career as a high school English teacher in Massachusetts. He then moved to his home state of Vermont and was the principal of Craftsbury Academy, one of the oldest continuously operated public schools in the country. He is currently the principal of Troy School in North Country Supervisory Union. Chris has a deep belief in the power of mentoring and is a national certified mentor as well. He coordinates the mentor program for his school district and serves as a mentor throughout Vermont with the Vermont Principals Association. Chris enjoys skiing, hiking, and hunting in the mountains of Vermont and is certainly experiencing that at this time of year, January 2014. So we would like to welcome Beverly, Adam, and Chris as our three experts this afternoon. At this time, I will turn the webinar over to Adam Drummond from Indiana.
Thank you, Carol, and we'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. And as we go through the webinar, just as a reminder, if you do have questions for any of the three of us, you're able to do that over on the right side of your screen. We'll be happy to answer those at the end. And as we go through today, I think it's important for you to remember that your role as a building principal or as an elementary or middle or high school principal, whatever your current position is in, you are doing more than just leading students and leading staffs. You are growing in your own craft, and you're trusting your team that you have created and that you're continuing to create, and you're empowering your employees. So it's important for us to remember our role and our job as educators. Next slide, please. As Carol mentioned, I am an elementary school principal and I'm a doctoral student at Ball State University. And you can see two pictures down there. One is of my two boys, Chase and Carson, and my wife, Tiffany. and I do some adjunct work with Huntington University in our community. And I think it's important for you as an educator and as a principal to remember that balance between professional life and personal life. And that's one of the most important areas for you, because if you have too much in one area and not in another, you are going to suffer burnout much faster and much quicker, and it's going to have performance results for your school as well. Next slide. As Carol mentioned, I'm principal at Lincoln Elementary School in Huntington, Indiana. We are a K-5 elementary school, and we service about 470 students. We're a very high transient building, so we have students coming in and coming out on a daily to weekly basis. We operate with about an 80% free and reduced lunch rate, and we have 37 teachers and about 30 more classified and support staff. We are the largest Title I funded school in our community, and so we do receive additional funding not only for staffing but also for other programs that we run in our building. Next slide, please. I think it's important for you to see just a little bit of the history that my school has come through the last several years, and at the top of the slide you will see the data results there. And what I want you to remember as a leader is that it is not an immediate result in what you're building. It is time sensitive. It takes time, it takes growth, and it takes commitment from you and your teaching staff, your parents, your community. And over time you will start to see those results, and we've been fortunate to see those results in both math and language arts with a 14 and a 16% increase. Meanwhile, having an increase in our socioeconomic status going up from a 16% increase over time. Next slide, please. So how do you get to that place of cultivating others in leadership and moving people forward? And I think it's important for you to first know, who are you as a leader? What are your strengths? What do you bring to the table that's going to perpetuate change? Equally important, what are your weaknesses? Where are those areas that you know are places that you need to grow? And how can you do that? And it's important that you look at those strengths and those weaknesses and identify what those areas are, and then look at your staff. You have teacher leaders, you have veteran staff, you have new teachers with new ideas coming in, you have colleagues across your community or across your district. Where can you build upon those resources to help you grow in those areas? And as Carol said, there's lots of research with the Wallace Foundation, and Marzano's research follows nicely with that. And Marzano identifies 21 responsibilities of the school leader. I encourage you to look at those 21 responsibilities and use those responsibilities to identify your strengths and weaknesses in creating your team. Next slide, please. Marzano goes through those 21 responsibilities, and his work has correlated those to achievement in schools. And what you'll see here is a correlation chart with the responsibility of the school leader, and you'll see situational awareness is at the top with the highest correlation, and that is the ability for the school leader to expect the unexpected, to be prepared for any situation. And we are in a very reactionary society right now, and so it takes extra time, it takes extra effort, and it takes extra planning on your end to be that leader who is situationally aware. One of the things that you might notice on this slide that might be a surprise to you is down at the bottom where it shows affirmation and relationships. Those do have a positive correlation, but they're some of our lowest responsibilities as a school leader. That certainly doesn't mean we don't spend time in those relationships. However, what it does mean is there are other areas of the school leadership job that perpetuate greater achievement. And it's important for you to be aware of those and look at these responsibilities, and then look at your school leaders and those within your building and how can they help support in some of these responsibility areas. Next slide, please. I think this is an important quote just for you to think about, and it comes from Vince Lombardi. And the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. And we all have different challenges that we face every day as a school leader. And it's important for us to look at what are the responsibilities of our job and how much are we willing to give and how much are we willing to invest in others to build that school culture that we want to create. Because the school culture isn't built by one person, it's built by a team. And it's that will to build that culture and to build that success that is so critical for our school leaders. Next slide, please. Marzano goes on to share with about 9 specific responsibilities in developing our leadership team. And nearly every school has either a leadership team, a quality improvement team, an instructional team, a CEO team, somebody that you go to as a unit. Encourage you to examine that team and look at these responsibilities. Marzano suggests these responsibilities are those key critical elements that should be apparent in all that we do. And can you go through each of these and identify someone on your staff in those leadership roles to help support you in these areas? If you don't have somebody currently on that team, it would be worth your time to really take a look at your school culture and look at your team and who can you help foster and mentor in that relationship. Next slide, please. Marzano goes on to give you just a few other suggestions of once you have that leadership team established. And the next one, number 2, distribute some responsibility throughout the leadership team. This can be a very daunting challenge. I know for me it's a very daunting challenge at times. My personality tends to be a type A personality who wants to be in control and to be in charge. Yet it's important that you let go of that responsibility and trust those people that you put in those positions to help create the success for your school. They may not do it the way that you did it, but if the end result is still meeting the needs of your school and your building, you have to be able to allow that flexibility in your staff. Then it's important to identify the right work. What is it that you're going to focus your time on? And then identify the order of magnitude, because we have many responsibilities as a school leader. We have many goals in our school, and we have to be able to identify in order what is going to create the most benefit for our school. And then managing that style in order to magnitude that change in that initiative. You know, there's 2 main types of leadership, transformational and transactional, and you need to be able to move from both of those in order to perpetuate change and identify that with your school leaders and your teacher leaders in your building. Next slide, please. What I have for you are just 10 quick ways that you could lead by example, because a lot of our change comes from within. We have the ability and the responsibility to model what effective leadership and effective instruction looks like. Today, more than ever, in our role as an instructional leader, our teachers are looking to us to guide, to facilitate, to provide that instruction. So one way to do that is to provide book clubs. And this is both for students and for staff. And this past year, I had a classroom teacher who approached me about our book studies and had a book that she wanted us to look at and to examine, and trusting her in that role and that responsibility to lead that book talk. And that was one of our most powerful professional development series, only because it was done among the peers. I was an active participant as a student, not as the facilitator. And it's important to raise your staff into that level of leading. The second one is quarterly observations. You know, I think it's important that we continue to move out of that silo ability. We have collaboration time, we have planning time, we talk about data together as a team, but yet we often go back into our classrooms and we teach by ourselves. We don't have people coming in and watching, and we're not going out and watching. And quarterly observations just provide that opportunity once every 9 weeks for a classroom teacher to go watch 15, 20 minutes of another teacher teach. So I think that's important for our staffs to be able to embrace that, because we become better when we model and then we go and we actually practice that. Number 3, positive postcards. This is a strategy that we use for our students, and then I in turn use for our staff as well. And I ask our staff to do at least 5 positive postcards a month to students about their successes. And our front office takes care of the postage so that it's not an additional cost for the teachers. Again, it's something we invest in because we believe in it. And it helps create that culture of high expectations and success. And then I make it a goal myself to write 5 positive note cards a month and give those out to our staff members as well. If you walk into our lounge, you'll see these postcards are at the tables as well. And so our teaching staff can also write postcards or notes of appreciation to one another throughout that time. Number 4 is strategy share-outs. Our staff meets once a month for an instructional meeting, and I've often had our leadership team identify a strategy that works for them, and they sign up for a month to actually share that strategy. It's 5-7 minutes where you share the strategy, you practice the strategy, and you talk about how you'll use it in your classroom. What this does is it puts our teachers in that role of leaders. one of my goals is to always be able to find somebody that I can help mentor and make a better leader than me. That is part of my job as an instructional leader, is to replace myself and to find somebody who can do my job better than me and help mentor them in that process. Strategy share-outs are one of those ways. Number 5 is flip the meeting. It sounds exactly like it says. You literally give information ahead of time on what you're going to be talking about, if it's an article you want them to read, if it's data you want them to look at, and then they come into that meeting ready to go. Meetings shouldn't be you standing, talking, going over a list of expectations, a list of upcoming events, a list of things. Anything that can be read should be communicated electronically, paper, pencil, but shouldn't waste the time that's precious for our staff in collaboration and planning. Next slide, please. One of the areas that we look at is literacy, and that's reading and writing, and developing a leadership team of committees. We have subcommittees in our building. Every staff member participates in a committee. We have co-chairs for our 4 committees, and those co-chairs then make up my CEO or my leadership team. In our building, we call it our literacy team. And we, as a team, meet every other week. We look at data, we look at instruction, we look at challenges that are in the building. If we have staff members that are frustrated, I want to hear about it there so that we can problem solve together. How do we solve this? You know, I'm really big on making sure that that monkey doesn't reside just on my shoulder, but it's the reality and responsibility of all of us working together. Number 7 is Strength Finders, and this is actually a New York Times best-selling book, and you can purchase this for your staff and ask them to go online and actually do and complete a Strength Finders assessment. I find that staff members love to learn about themselves. They want to know what they're good at and what they can improve upon. Once they know what their strengths are, they're able to go to that next step. So I think that's a great strategy to help identify leadership skills within your entire building. Number 8 is photobomb, and this is a strategy that I just started this year. With all of the changes of instruction going on across the country, I know that walkthroughs and observations and just being in classrooms has become a very important part of the role of the principal. And one of the things that I do is I take my iPad into every classroom, and I make a goal every day to at least take a photo of something fantastic and send it out all staff. It's very short, it's very sweet in terms of the subject line. They should only have to read the subject line and see the photo and see the strategy, or see the product, or see the collaboration that's happening in the classroom. Once a day, a quick, here's what we see, what's happening, and it fosters that ability to collaborate throughout the building. Number 9 is called Matrix of Excellence. This allows the school leadership and all of our staff members to identify what are you good at. Select 2 or 3 areas of instruction. Is it technology? Is it classroom management, parent communication? What are you good at? Everyone participates, and you essentially create a matrix where you show where everybody's at in staff and what they're good at. And then if somebody's struggling, you can say, have you talked to this person? They feel very confident in parent communication. They can give you some strategies on how do you deal with a difficult parent. So again, not all the answers are coming from me as the principal, but it's fostering that leadership. And number 10, of course, I've already mentioned, it's about replacing yourself. My goal as a school leader is to take that next step and have somebody be better than me. I want to create better teachers, I want to create better leaders, and I want to create better people who can do the job and do it better than I can in that process. Next slide, please. Rita Pearson is an educator who has spent time across the country sharing, and unfortunately she passed away unexpectedly in June of 2013. But this quote has stuck with me ever since I heard her speak. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be. I share this with you because that is our role as educators. We have to help our students learn that they can be better than they thought they can be, but our role as an educator and as a leader is also to ensure that our teachers know they can be better than they thought they can be. Our secretaries, our custodians, our cafeteria staff, our parents can all be better than what they thought they could be. Next slide, please. So that takes you through some information that I've shared with you here today. I am going to be passing the baton, so to speak, over to Bev, and she's going to continue on in our conversation today about how do we take leaders to that next level and develop that leadership. But I want you to remember it's about growing our craft, trusting our team, and empowering our employees.
Thank you, Adam. This is Carol Riley again. I would like to let you know there were a number of questions that came in about Marzano's work, and I will be sharing those questions, searching for your answers at the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, and at this time we would like to turn over the webinar to Beverly Lund from Spokane Public Schools in the state of Washington.
Well, good afternoon. I guess it's evening almost for some of you, and it's a delight to be here. I so got wrapped up in all the things that Adam was saying that I just said yes, 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 and I would like to share what I believe to be true. It's philosophically building the team and building the people you work with so that you can achieve more for the students. Next slide, please. We were, this is sort of a result of building the leadership in our building over the years. I've been here 18 years, and we were given the distinction of a National Distinguished Title I school in 2010, I believe, and that doesn't happen unless everybody's working together and everyone is working using their talents and their strengths toward the goal of student achievement. We are a large school. We are a Title I school. We fluctuate between 85% and 90% poverty. Like Adam's school, we have a lot of mobility, so we need to work with ways to engage students the minute they walk into our school building. And we have large ELL and special education populations that we have worked together to incorporate into our in-class models, and that, of course, takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of teamwork and a lot of leadership. Next slide, please. I think Carol already talked to you about these things. I have been an elementary principal for a very long time, 25 years. I did receive the honor of National Distinguished Principal for Washington State, and am still sort of in awe that happened. I am mentoring now. I have been through the beginning weekend of the mentor program through NAESP, and I am officially mentoring in our district a second-year principal colleague, and I have a new principal assistant and also an intern that I am mentoring using those strategies, which have been really very helpful. And as Adam said, we need to remember that we have other roles in our life. I am the mother of a 15-year-old daughter who is now coming to the end of driver's education, which is probably a little more scary than the beginning of driver's education. But we do have lives, and we do need balance so that we can bring our best to the work that we do in our schools. Next slide, please. We believe, and I believe, that one of the biggest responsibilities I have is to establish the culture of leadership, because we can't get where we need to be without having various staff with strengths in all different areas working to lead and to help produce the results we need. We want our capacity to be broadened so that everybody is bringing their strengths, and everybody is sharing that and leading in where their strengths are. Adam mentioned strengths finders, and I really like what they say in that book and in that philosophy of building on your strengths. We can work on our weaknesses, but building on our strengths is where we get the biggest return for our investment, and we build on the strengths of our staff as well to get the biggest return on the investment. We do expect that taking a leadership role at Whitman Elementary is a responsibility of everyone in varying degrees, that if that's a skill you have, we would hope that people would step up, and we cultivate that so that everyone is seen as needing to step up and lead at one point or another. And again, it's a mindset. Many of the things we do are more of a mindset and a way we are with our staff than a particular program. Next slide, please. We have, through that also, through our work with our leadership team and our cultivation of leadership in our our school, we won a national award for mathematics, and the picture you see there is our leadership team who started the change for mathematics in our school, including the special education teacher and our instructional coach in that team, and adding that inclusion for our special education students and access to the regular curriculum has shown a huge amount of growth for those students, and that can't happen without strong leadership throughout the building. Next slide, please. Well, and I've spoken to this a little bit, we have more leaders, and so we have more student opportunities. We want to provide lots of opportunities for our students because our students don't particularly have opportunities outside of the school. We have music events, sports and extracurricular activities, and people who are amazing at leading those things. We have a student leadership duo, actually trio of teachers that is amazing in organizing students to be leading things in the school, and they have a passion and a skill at that I frankly don't have, and it's wonderful to know that they can do that and have a passion for doing that. We have a student technology team, and we have some students who are the troubleshooting team for various classrooms, and they go and help troubleshoot because they're the, quote, experts on the technology team for the school, and they go and help troubleshoot in various classrooms. And that is led by a teacher who happens to be passionate about technology and student leadership. And we also have, through our title and through our parent organization, many parent involvement activities that happen because people are passionate about it and they want it to go well, and they want to have those activities for parents and families. Next slide, please. We have professional development opportunities in our building that have come about because we have leaders who have stepped up to be our curriculum contacts so that they can be content-specific leaders for our professional development in our school. We have, again, the technology leaders, and they provide professional development for us, and as you know, we have some people who are very techno-savvy, and we have others that are really nervous about the technology. So it helps to have those leaders in the building that can go spend a few minutes with this teacher or that teacher, and we do have a program where they can be paid to mentor a half an hour for a teacher that needs some help with technology and integrating it into their lessons. That's been a big bonus for our school. And we do have instructional coaches as well who work as mentors and leaders in the professional development, as well as coach along the side with teachers to co-teach with them and demonstrate instructional practice as well. Next slide, please. Our student leadership is a lot of fun to watch because the leaders, the teacher leaders who work with this group are so enthusiastic, and they get the students working on assemblies and patrol and awards and recognitions, and they bring a huge amount of enthusiasm to our assemblies, to our work that we do. They take on projects, they help students become leaders, and the students really step up and are proud to be leaders with those staff members heading up the program. Next slide, please. Sometimes it's interesting that we think of our certificated staff being our leaders, but we have supervisors who are basically in charge of student supervision and need to be given the responsibility and the free rein to make decisions on how best to supervise, how to implement new programs for supervision, how to do a better job with the kids that they serve. And they do an amazing job. They know they are leaders. They know they are expected to take leadership roles with each other and with the students. Next slide, please. We have some structures in our building. We have building teams and grade level teams. Many years ago, our district set aside a weekly time of collaboration where students arrive late and we have collaborating time. It's mostly for grade level collaboration because teachers have come to be hungry for that time to work together, plan together, look at student data together, make plans for individual students together, design intervention strategies for various students. And when we started that, it was a little bit clunky and people didn't really know how to collaborate, and we worked on that together. And as we moved to more of an inclusive model with all of our high needs students, we realized we needed to work together because we have to provide for all the students and we don't have more time in the day. We need to work smarter. For our building teams, we do look for the leaders who have a strength and an interest in an area, and I've spoken to some of those areas, the coaching and the curriculum. I think I've talked about those things. We have a social committee that rotates and takes care of needs for our staff that are the other side, the human needs that we have that maybe sometimes we put aside if we're busy people, but our social committee is a group of leaders who take care of those needs in our staff. Next slide, please. In our weekly collaboration, what we have found, again, we call it working smarter. It's a real synergy that happens when grade levels meet and they're meeting with the special ed teacher and the ELL teacher, and they're talking about students and coordinating lesson structure. There's a synergy that happens, and the sharing makes everyone think better, work better, think smarter, and it is better than the sum of the individuals. I think in the Wallace papers, they said it gives access to the collective knowledge of the wisdom of the school community. That's what we have found to be very, very useful, and we can't live without that at this point in our school. Next slide, please. Parent leadership, we have an amazing parent-teacher organization. They are, we call them small and mighty, but they are committed, and they could run a corporation, I'm sure. There are a few people who can do many, many things, and our school benefits greatly from that. They are in charge of fundraisers. They run a carnival. We bring parents in for craft night and book bingo. We have a huge amount of parent support in the classroom and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. And I want to thank you for your time. I don't know how we're doing on time, but my best to you as you lead.
Thank you, Beverly. Again, you shared so many important topics around collaboration, supporting your teachers to work together, both your teachers and your non-certified staff, and how important that is. We did get 2 questions about how the management of those collaborative teams work, and I will share that question with you again at the end of the webinar. But thank you so much for your insight and sharing all your wonderful ideas with us.
Thank you.
Next on our webinar is our third expert, Chris Young, who hails from Vermont and has many, many other ideas to share with us and how things are working in the North Country around shared leadership. Chris, we're turning it over to you.
Thank you, Carol, and just wanted to recognize my fellow presenters. It's been great to go through our practice rounds a few times and learn from them. It's been very valuable to me, and also to Carol for organizing it. I think we would all agree that, for me anyway, if once I have to think through something a little bit more deeply, I learn a lot about myself in the topic as well. So thank you for this opportunity. Next slide, please. I'm also battling a little bit of a cold here, so I'll try to keep my voice somewhat on par. Unfortunately, the picture that was taken here was last year when we had more snow than we have now. We all up here in the North Country certainly look forward to that, and The temperature is about 1 degree with about 30-mile-an-hour winds, so won't be looking like that anytime soon. But we certainly have enjoyed our time here, and as Carol mentioned at the beginning, my wife was transplanted from Boston to this area, and it's my home state, so I've been able to be very fortunate in practicing my expertise in the same district that I went to school, which gives me a little bit of an added incentive because my own children go through here as I did. My parents were teachers here, so it all just kind of comes together as a long continuum for me. Next slide, please. For Troy School, we are located in what is called the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. It's the tiny corner between New Hampshire and the Canadian border. If I were to look out the back of our school, I could see the Canadian border. We have 179 students, grades K through 8. The K through 8 structure is... Actually, let me ask a quick clarifying question, Carol. Are you getting feedback from students dismissing from basketball practice here?
We are, but it certainly sounds like every other school that we've been in, so it's not too disturbing at all, but we do hear students in the background.
Okay, our after-school program is letting out, and basketball practice is letting out as well. We have about 24% of our students who receive specialized services. Again, 80% food is lunch, and Vermont is one of the least diverse states in the nation, and we also, as other presenters have mentioned, have a very high migration, which is somewhat unique here in a more rural environment. We actually have a high rental property in town, and that tends to lend itself to folks moving in and out on a much more frequent basis than in some of the schools in our district that have a much more stable student body, which is just something that we certainly come to deal with and work with families. We think we're getting pretty good at it, but always room for improvement. Next slide, please. My perspective on cultivating leadership in others comes from experience, but also from my training through NAESP. And for those who aren't familiar with it, the Leading Learning Communities, what our principals should know and be able to do, is a great framework. It was able to put into much more clear language for me what life would look like if life were perfect in schools. And certainly we aren't there, and it's something for us to strive for. But the standard that I'm going to focus on for tonight is Standard 1, which is to lead schools in a way that places student and adult learning at the center. This book, Leading Learning Communities, is broken into six standards. Each standard has 4 or 5 strategies associated with it, and I'll explain a little bit what those levels and strategies are in just a second. So next slide, please. The third strategy under the first standard is to capitalize on the leadership skills of others. As I mentioned, between the 6 standards and 4 or 5 strategies per each standard, for the folks who put this work together to identify a specific strategy on capitalizing the leadership skills of others, I think emphasizes how important it is for us as principals to really pay attention to this. And I think that experience bears this out as well. But again, it's just nice to be able to point to a specific reference and say, well, here is what life looks like under varying degrees of this particular standard and strategy. So next slide, please. The levels for each of the strategies, as you can see from the graphic, range from level 1 being the least desirable state and level 5 being most desirable. We certainly all shoot for the most desirable. And again, I would urge you to go to this book. When I do my mentor work, it kind of reads to the folks that I work with as an indication of best practice, and really clarifies a lot of what the first year and second year principals are kind of struggling with and confused about. And they tend to not get too frustrated that they're not level 5 because no one is. However, it does give them sort of something to shoot for, which I think is great. So the next slide, please. Level 1 under Standard 1, again, Standard 1 is leading schools. That places learning at the center. And Strategy 3 is capitalizing on the leadership of others, is where the principal runs the school, making all decisions with limited participation from staff. And we probably, many of us may have been in situations where the principal has been there for 20 years and is used to doing things his or her way, or maybe it's more of a power issue, or maybe there are other factors that go into a school running that way, which can be somewhat efficient. I'm not sure it's effective, but it can certainly allows the buses to be there on time and school to begin and end on time, and discipline is probably good. Whether or not that results in student learning is another question. But that is the level 1. That will be what we consider least desirable. The only other point I would make on this is that for some folks in our schools, this is very comfortable. I think that the folks maybe who have been around for a while or are used to a certain style, it's very easy to fall into a specific role and not deviate from that role when things are so autocratic. And so there may be folks in your building that would prefer to be told exactly what to do and to not be asked to step outside of that. And I think we have to be aware of that. And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit as well. Next slide, please. And then level 5, which certainly is where we would aspire to be, is a building where shared leadership culture builds on the alignment of everyone's leadership style, skill, and experience, and shared leadership creates shared responsibility for implementation and accountability for results. So as desirable as that may be, obviously it takes a ton of work to get there. And even for the folks who get this and the importance of it, it can be really hard to get to that point. Even with the most well-meaning and well-intentioned folks in your building, I think that it is not good enough just to say this is what we want to do and therefore it's going to happen. So I'll describe in just a couple slides here what that could look like in your schools. Next slide, please. So in order to get from level 1 or wherever level you might find yourself to level 5, I think that there are a couple things that we can look at. The first is to intentionally look for, and in some cases create, opportunities for others to lead. I think that there are things that happen in all of our buildings. Bev and Adam both indicated several of those opportunities. If they don't exist, I would highly encourage you to find ways to make them exist. With some of the new folks that I work with who are coming into buildings and not necessarily knowing what the structures are in place that allow others to participate in leadership, I'm encouraging them just to find something to do. Maybe it's as simple as just planning a literacy night. Get something for folks to all participate in so that they can be on board with this. And the others is to, one is to match interest and aptitude with opportunities. I think there are some folks in our buildings that are really good at some things and others at others, and we need to make sure that we're not asking folks to step way out of their comfort zone, but to maximize what they are currently good at. And finally is once we've identified those opportunities and the folks that are most capable of fulfilling those opportunities, let's build their capacity. Let's give them some training so that they can really succeed in whatever it is that we're asking them to do. And I should also mention that these three are based much more on experience from my perspective than any research, but I do have some research I think that supports these three ideas. Next slide, please. So leadership opportunities, what conditions in schools or opportunities for us to induce, entice, or otherwise convince others to lead? And I use the word induce intentionally. One piece of work that I reference at the end of my presentation is by Deborah Stone. It's called The Policy Paradox, The Art of Political Decision Making. And the idea of inducements, often we consider them to be negative. However, they really are not necessarily negative. They are whatever we can do to find ways to get folks to do what we want them to do. And again, they can be negative in some ways, but in terms of building a leadership culture, we much more lean towards positive support for that. And it might be informal. It could be a school-wide event, as I mentioned earlier. It could be staff activities, such as we recently had ours. Our staff party was a was learning how to curl, which none of us had ever done before. And I don't know about you folks, but organizing a staff party and staff activity, you have to create a balance between, folks that are maybe experts at golf or something else versus folks who don't know what they're doing. So we chose something that none of us know how to do. And there are some folks on staff that are very, very good at picking up an activity like that and running with it. And versus the more formal, where we might ask folks to be on committees, to be lead teachers, advisors, serve on teams. There might be the district representatives at the supervisory union for some of our larger committees, things like that. Next slide, please. And once we have those opportunities identified, whatever they might be, let's find the folks who are most able to successfully participate in those. I'm glad to hear that other folks are using StrengthsFinder. I think that's a wonderful tool. The example that they use, for those who are not familiar with it, is if you're not familiar with the movie Rudy, which is about a Notre Dame student who wants to be on the football team and spends several years being on that football team, even though he's undersized and too slow and et cetera. Their example is, well, what if he had put his efforts into something else that he was actually already good at? How great would he have been in that? I think that's an interesting thought on that. So, for instance, what we consider a culture club, the folks that put together that staff activity, are not necessarily the folks that are going to be the best on our data teams. The folks who are great at strategic planning or action planning are not necessarily going to be the folks that are going to serve on our wellness committee. The folks that are going to look at the school spirit days and food drives and holiday parties are not necessarily the folks that we're going to ask to serve on district assessment teams and curriculum committees and things like that. And I think that we just have to be aware of and validate what folks are particularly good at and try to support them in an area that they're going to be most successful. And I think that really does get us closer to that level 5 of the shared leadership model. Next slide, please. Just a couple quick thoughts on student leadership before I get to the capacity and building that. In a K through 8 school, in a relatively small school of 180 kids, it's interesting to have middle schoolers, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders side by each with some of our younger kids. And I'm always struck at how if the adults would just get out of the way, the kids would figure this out on their own. And so I think it's a really nice reminder for us when I see our 8th graders there at our student council painting a mural outside our building. They have more ways to lead in the school than we could ever imagine. Deb mentioned her kids could run a corporation, and I think that's a great analogy. So we certainly would like to make sure that we provide opportunities for them as well. Next slide, please. And so once we, again, have the opportunities identified, we have the folks in place that we think are going to be able to fulfill the responsibilities of that leadership position, then we have to ask ourselves, what tools do they need to do this? And another work, Jenkins and Jenkins work around character and leadership, political realism, and public virtue in nonprofit organizations. They sort of reframe Machiavelli's take on things, and the quote stuck with me: "Beware the unarmed prophet." We can't ask folks to go into a situation, let's say it's a curriculum committee, where there may be some contentious issues around choosing a program or the direction of a particular curriculum, without the ability to navigate through that. That just isn't fair. Nor is it fair to ask the culture committee or the climate committee to plan an activity that is likely to fall on its face. We need to give folks some tools in order to successfully do these things. That might be as simple as logistics. It might be as simple as asking the school secretary or some other folks to make some phone calls or to do something along those lines. It might be giving them a budget, resources. Might be making sure that they don't have to worry about the transportation to a field trip or something along those lines. And then when you get, I think, to a little bit of a higher level, I love the Bowman and Deal framework. I've mentioned Deborah Stone, I've mentioned Jenkins, Character of Leadership. Bowman and Deal, for those who are not familiar, we're in reframing organizations, and they classify the situations that we might encounter and different ways that we might be able to address them. For instance, we might look at one through a political frame. We might look at one through a symbolic frame. Look at one through a structural frame. And these frameworks, I think, give folks a really clear sense of what situation am I encountering and what frame might I need to apply in this situation. And that's actually a resource that I use when I teach a research methods course at a local college. Next slide, please. And a little bit of a story here, but when I teach I teach a research methods course. The action research project that I ask students to do lends itself to a school improvement direction. And it occurred to me after I taught it for the first time that I wasn't really just teaching research methods. I was teaching a school change course. And these kids, I shouldn't say kids, the students were coming up with wonderful projects. Kindergarten screening is a predictor of academic achievement, improving students' confidence and proficiency in writing, the writing workshop model at alternative high school, what is the impact of writing weekly constructive responsive student achievement, really good stuff. And it dawned on me that I was asking them to do these projects, and they were doing them. However, they weren't going to go anywhere once they were completed unless they had something in their back pocket, unless they were able to approach the school principal or the school board or the superintendent and say, here's what I found, here's what I'd like to do. Here's some information, what can we do to affect some positive change as a result of what I learned in this particular project. And so that really hit home for me in terms of making sure that the folks we are asking to be leaders have the ability and the tools necessary to navigate through what can be an incredibly complex situation. Next slide, please. And so these are the books that I referenced in the presentation. I think just to recap, intentionally looking for opportunities, making sure we're matching the skills and interests of our folks with these opportunities, and then providing folks with the support to succeed in these opportunities, I think are the three main things that I'd like you folks to leave with. And with that, I will turn it back over to Carol.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Actually, we do have a question for you as well, and it is about you building capacity, and I will come back to that question, but thank you so much. All three of you did just an incredible job of helping us understand the shared leadership issues. We only have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to ask a question of each of you, and I would like you to take a look at this chart that you see on your screen, and it really talks about when you build leadership, you really are talking about leadership of all staff. So what is all staff? Staff is not just classroom teachers. Those of you who are fortunate enough to have assistant or vice principals, non-certified staff. Beverly, you talked about other staff members in your presentation. Chris, you talked about students, and Adam, you talked about your business leaders and some of the other individuals that all create that shared leadership vision and help make your schools much more effective. So there's the old model with the principal at the center, and then a new model where everybody participates. No longer is the principal at the top of the triangle and the only person that is running a school, but now the principal is at the center, but they emanate the energy and motivation and insight into developing others. One of the principals that we have worked with wanted to more deeply understand if there was shared leadership in their school. He always said there was, and teachers felt as though they had leadership positions, but he knew that it took a lot more than just words saying that there is shared leadership. So he did an activity and had a list of things that contribute in a very clear way to understanding the evidence around shared leadership. And this is just an example of one page of a document that he had put together. And that, I think, is valuable for all of us to really look at evidence. Okay, what does shared leadership really look like? How are we recognizing people? Is staff really creating activities for themselves that incorporate all of the tenets that we understand about leading? So this is an opportunity for individuals to take a look at what shared leadership and how that's being implemented in their schools. So back to our questions. Adam, one of the questions that came through for you was you quoted Marzano and Marzano's 21 responsibilities, and then really you went into a little more depth about the 9 responsibilities that Marzano talks about. And they are situational awareness, relationships, communication culture, and things like optimizer and affirmation, ideals and beliefs and visibility. The question was, we know that those things are important, but how does that relate to, and how do you get evidence from those areas in principal evaluation tools that are really assessing the effectiveness of a principal? So how does Marzano's responsibilities relate to principal evaluation tools?
You know, I think when you look at your principal evaluation tools, and of course every state has different methods and standards that they've created. So in my school district and in the state of Indiana, we have a rubric. And within that rubric, as I go through those areas, those responsibilities line up actually very nicely in terms of these areas such as affirmation, ideals, belief, communication, culture, and you have to be proactive in being able to find what does that evidence look like. So let me give you an example. One of those areas is communication. So how do you provide effective communication to staff, to community leaders, to volunteers? And so that might be your weekly newsletter you send out to staff. Maybe if you do a Twitter account with your parents and family involvement groups. So you're providing that evidence of what it looks like. And for input, for example, you know, I provide my staff, my students, and my parents 3 times a year through surveys an opportunity to get feedback. What works, what doesn't work, what do we need to improve upon, and then our school as a staff looks at that information. So I think it's putting those categories in front of you and then you assigning what do I currently do to show a product of each of those areas.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Beverly, your questions, actually there were 2. You talked about your teacher coaches. So the question is, how do you pay teacher coaches, and if so, how is that funded? Then the other question was, you talked also about your after-school activities, and your teachers really work with individuals based on their interests and strengths. So do you pay your teachers for doing the extracurricular activities?
The extracurricular, yes, we do have a budget for that. Many teachers just choose to do things outside of that extracurricular system and payment method, but yes, we do, and we've tried various methods of allowing teachers to access that extracurricular pay for time spent with kids outside of the school day, and yeah, we do pay for that.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And Chris, you talked, really gave us some great insight on building capacity. So if you could just quickly respond to the comment about a comment that was written, how do you find how do you build capacity in those staff members that don't want to get out of their comfort zone and really don't engage in the whole shared leadership concept?
Well, I have two immediate thoughts to that. The first is that I certainly wouldn't put anyone in a position of that they were not comfortable with. However, it's also the concept of if we're not going to wait for everyone to get on the bus. So I think that it takes a little bit more time to find an area that the person might be more interested or more willing to participate in. But if that person is completely unwilling, and I suppose put my reflective thinking on here, maybe more unable to participate in the leadership, I'd want to know more about that. What's preventing that from happening? Are there some miscommunication, or is there some misunderstandings? Really try to get at it, and at the end of the day, not everyone is going to be able to participate in a level 5 shared leadership model. But that doesn't mean you're not going to have a level 5 leadership model in your school, and I think that unfortunate that not everyone would be there, but I think the culture, the overall culture, would support what you were doing, and that would marginalize people who are not willing to get on board with that.
Great, great answer. Thank you so much. Well, the webinar has been absolutely terrific. I would like our audience to know that we have another one scheduled on January 14th, and February 11th will be our final one in this Wallace Foundation series. So we hope people will come and join us for those. So at this time, I would very much like to thank Adam and Beverly and Chris for their outstanding experiences and expertise and their ability to share it in a very clear way with all of us. So thank you so much, and thanks again to the Wallace Foundation for supporting us in our endeavor as a national organization to bring our experts to the field and to really help principals doing great work every day in any way that we can. So thank you, Adam, Beverly, and Chris. Thanks so much.